Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ask a Property Manager episode 25. Today is June 17th, 2020. Coming to you from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo. I'm Andrew Schultz, Principal Broker of Own Buffalo, Inc. And on today's show, we're going to be talking to you about how to protect yourself when working with contractors. And I also have a very special announcement. So before we jump into that, we're going to plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager drop every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can find those on our Facebook page. If you're watching us live right now, chances are that's where you found us. Facebook.com/Buffalo Foreclosed Homes. You can also find the replay on the Facebook page after it airs on the same day. You can also find that on our YouTube page. You can grab a link over at ownbuffalo.com to take you to our YouTube page, or you can just search for the company name on YouTube and we will pop right up. Generally speaking, these do go live on YouTube the same day that we post them on Facebook. So these generally go up about an hour or so, maybe a couple hours afterwards. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram. We've been doing that for about a month and a half, maybe 2 months now. We do share a little bit different content over there than what we would share on either Facebook or YouTube, so it's definitely worth following. And last but not least, we'll talk about how you can grab a free 30-minute phone consultation over at ownbuffalo.com. I'll jump over to my desktop screen here real quick. And you can see that I do have a couple of open time slots for this week. And then next week I have a few open time slots as well. And the way to book these is just by going to ownbuffalo.com, scroll down, click on free 30-minute consultation, and it drops you right to the correct page. So that'll put you right where you want to be. That pretty much covers all of our social media. We do appreciate you guys following us. It really does help us to find a bigger audience and to grow. And every single time that someone follows us, it does help us, to move forward, to grow, and things like that. So it's super, super important to us that you like the content that we're putting out and engage with us in the content that we are putting out. All right, let's jump right into our breaking news. I'm super excited about this. Could hardly sleep last night because I knew I was going to get to announce this today. Let's start with a special announcement. I'm super excited to announce that I've been asked to host the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. Some of you may remember back in September of 2017, Ask a Property Manager was actually a segment produced by Eric over at the Rent Prep. And it was basically Eric would host it and I would come on weekly as the industry professional. And it worked really, really well. And eventually we kind of moved away from that format. But it was, I really enjoyed doing it. So in January of this year, January 1st, as a matter of fact, I went ahead and revived the Ask a Property Manager format in a little bit different style than what Eric and I were doing it. And so far, it's been working pretty well. I've been having a lot of fun doing it. And I made a commitment to myself that every Wednesday, I'm going to be doing this Ask a Property Manager show. And here we are 25 weeks in now, and I'm pretty sure, as a matter of fact, I know as fact, we've hit one every single week, even when I've been at conferences and things like that. We're still managing to get an episode out to you guys every single week on Wednesdays, right at that 10 a.m. Time frame. So anyway, when I was approached and asked to do the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast, it was super exciting for me because it's an opportunity to work with people that I've worked with in the past. Super interesting the way that we're going to be setting it up. We've been working on a new format that we're pretty excited to share with everyone. It's going to be more of a multiple segment podcast, which is a little bit of a change from the normal. Really an exciting way to look at things. We're going to have multiple different segments, a lot of different opportunities for our community to interact with us and for us to interact with our community. So all that being said, tune in on June 25th when Eric and I are going to be talking about some of the different process changes that we've experienced as a result of the pandemic. And then on July 2nd and every Thursday thereafter, we'll be dropping new episodes of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast with the new format and with me as the host. Again, I'm super pumped about this. I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am to be working with the guys over at Rent Prep on their podcast. And you can find the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast on iTunes, Google, Stitcher, pretty much wherever you listen to podcasts. In the interest of full disclosure, I think it's important to note that I do business with Rent Prep. They are the company that we use for our tenant screening, and Rent Prep does business with Own Buffalo. One of their staff members has rental property that we do manage. So this is more or less a continuation of a mutually beneficial relationship for us, and it means that we get to continue to produce high-quality, engaging content for you guys on their podcast well into the future. I was asked by somebody, and there's not many people who knew about this before today's announcement, like a handful of people. And somebody had asked me, what happens to the current Ask a Property Manager segment? Nothing. I maintain control over the Ask a Property Manager show. You're going to continue to get this every single Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and then you'll be able to download the Rent Prep podcast every Thursday and listen to that as well. Basically, this is just an extension of our content offerings, and we hope that you guys follow us over there, and we're really looking forward to it. So super pumped about that. I think I've said that about 75 times now. So cheers to new opportunity. I think that's the first time I've ever cheersed with an iced coffee. Thank you all so much for your support during all of this, and I look forward to interacting with you both here on Ask a Property Manager and also via the podcast. So I want to jump into our main topic for the day. So today we're going to be talking about dealing with contractors, how to protect yourself when dealing with contractors. And this is probably a topic that I could have spent easily 2 hours talking about. I mean, there's so much nuance that goes into dealing with contractors and insurances and scopes of work and this and that and the other thing. There's a million different things that can go wrong. And I wanted to talk today about basically the 2 main points. Actually, I'm going to call it 3 main points. One of them's not listed on here. I'm going to talk about the 3 main points that we make sure that we hit whenever we start working with a new contractor or continue working with an existing contractor, the points that we make sure that we hit every single time, because by hitting these 3 things, you're going to solve about 90% of your problems up front. The first thing that I want to talk about is insurance and also the W-9 form. I'm going to jump back over to my desktop here. I do have a sample W-9 form pulled up so that you could take a look at it. What the W-9 form does is, this is an IRS form. It's a standard form that the IRS publishes, and it basically allows you as the landlord, the property owner, or whatever the case may be, it allows you to collect your contractor's tax identification number so that at the end of the year, when you have to issue your 1099 form to that vendor, you have all of their information up front and you don't have to try to chase them, and now they don't want to supply it because they don't think they don't want to pay the tax on it and blah, blah, blah. By getting the W-9 up front before you've ever issued check number 1 to the contractor to start work, now you know you have this information, so it doesn't become a problem in January of next year when you're getting ready to do your 1099 forms and have to send them out to the vendor, and now you're chasing someone trying to get their tax information so that you can report it to the IRS properly. So definitely make sure that you have a W-9. You can literally find this form by going to Google and typing IRS W-9, and it'll pop right up. It's probably going to be the first result. Every contractor needs to fill this out, and you need to keep this on file for your tax purposes. Every single contractor needs to fill this out. You know, there's discussion about, well, you don't have to 1099 somebody until you've paid them $600. I don't care. Every single vendor fills out a W-9. Then you never have to worry about, oh, well, we just passed the $600 threshold with this person. Now we need paper. Every single vendor fills out a W-9 before they start doing any work. And it solves a big headache for you right off the bat. Next, I wanted to jump into the liability form. It's called an accord form. This is a form that your contractor should be able to provide to you, showing that they have proof of insurance. I'll run through this a little bit. I'm not an expert on these forms, but I know enough to be able to explain kind of what it is that we're looking at and what you should be looking for on the form. Realistically speaking, if you ever have an insurance question, talk to your homeowner's insurance provider. They'll be able to tell you exactly what you should be doing to make sure that you're covered in the event that you have a vendor that comes out to the property. I went ahead and blacked out some of the information on this just to protect the vendor, since this is a current vendor that we're working with. This first box here that says producer, this is actually going to be the name of the insurance company. And then directly to the right of that, you'll have the contact name, the phone number, the email address, and over here is actually a fax number, but I have that covered up at the moment. So you'll have the name of the insurance company, you'll have the contact info for whoever is insuring this individual, and that way you can make a phone call verification if necessary if you think something is suspect on the form. Next box down is the insured. That's your contractor. Should have the contractor's company name. It should have their full address and things like that. Sometimes it'll have a phone number, not always, it just kind of depends. But that'll be the actual contractor that you are working with, so you'll want to make sure that all that information matches. To the right of that, you can see the different insurers. For instance, this person has two different insurers, one of them for their general liability insurance and one of them for their workers' compensation insurance. So you can list more than one insurer on this same form. And then we'll scroll down here and we're now looking at what the actual coverages are. So starting on the left-hand side here, you have the insurers column. You can see here, this is insurer A and then this is insurer B. One is covering the general liability, one is covering the workers' compensation. That's pretty standard, especially here in the state of New York. You'll find that most insurance companies, most contractors will have two different insurance companies, one for general liability and one for workers' comp. Especially contractors, a lot of contractors in New York State will be insured for workers' comp under New York State Insurance Fund. And then they'll have their general liability somewhere else, whether it be Hartford or Prudential, wherever. So you can see here that they do carry their commercial general liability, and it's written as a by occurrence policy. And then over here, you can see on the right-hand side, these are the limits of the policy. So you can see that each occurrence, so this vendor is covered up to $1 million each occurrence. So in the event that something happens at the property, they're covered up to $1 million for every incident. They're covered up to a general aggregate of $2 million. So that essentially means that they can have a couple of $1 million claims against this policy before they're essentially out of their insurance. They've expended their entire insurance policy. Those are the two things that I look at. You also have damage to rented premises here, medical expenses, personal injury, things like that. Your insurance company can run you through more in depth what all of that means and what limits that you should have given whatever project you're working on. But typically speaking, I like to see an insurance policy that has a $1 million per occurrence and a $2 million general aggregate. That makes me feel very comfortable. It means that the vendor essentially has what I consider proper insurance. So your insurance company may want more or less. You may not need $1 million if it's just somebody that's coming to cut a lawn or something like that. Something to keep in mind. Your insurance company can definitely give you much more information on that than what I can. Then I wanted to scroll down and talk about workers' compensation for a minute. If you have a contractor that says that they don't need workers' compensation insurance, but they have people working for them, they're lying to you. If you have any employees working for you, you need to have workers' compensation insurance to protect those employees. So you need to have proof of that workers' compensation insurance so that you know that they're actually doing what they say that they're doing and paying the proper workers' comp and things like that. So whenever we have a vendor that is more than a one-man band, guy in a van type thing, we always make sure that they are carrying the proper workers' compensation insurance as well. In the state of New York, the way it works is if your vendor doesn't have workers' compensation insurance, you wind up picking up compensation for that vendor on your compensation insurance. So it's definitely worth noting that if your vendor doesn't have workers' compensation insurance, that's definitely something to dig into a little bit more in depth. There are some exemptions out there in theory for the one-man bands and stuff like that. But ultimately, New York State's going to make sure that comp is paid on that individual one way, shape, or form. So a lot of times what will happen is your comp policy will pick up where their comp policy leads off or doesn't exist. So that's the two things that I wanted to mention with regards to both the W-9 and the insurance. Making sure that you have a valid insurance policy is critical before you allow a vendor to come into your property and do work. I'm actually going to jump back to that. I forgot that I wanted to cover one other thing. Make sure that you are named as an additional insured on the vendor's insurance policy, on their general liability policy. I went ahead and blanked out the certificate holder here because it was back from when we were at Realty Edge, and now it's a different certificate holder. But you can see here, the certificate holder is an additional insured as required by written contract. Certificate holder in this instance was Realty Edge. Now it would be Own Buffalo. So you can kind of see where we're at, and you'll know that you've been named as an additional insured. There's a few different ways that you can check it. Number one, there's an additional insured column here. There will be a Y for yes in this column, showing that you're named as an additional insured on their general liability policy. Generally speaking, you'll see something in the description of operations field as well, and then you'll be listed as the certificate holder. Being named as an additional insured helps to protect you, helps to protect your asset. It might cost your vendor, $50 to $100 to add you as an additional insured, but if they're doing a large project, or if they're doing a large number of projects, somebody that you're going to be working with over a long period of time, definitely force the issue and get named as an additional insured on their general liability policy. So the other thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to protecting yourself when dealing with contractors is simply the scope of work. And what I mean by scope of work is that's what you're going off of when you're talking about the work that's being done. It should outline everything that's being done as part of the job. It should be detailed in its nature, and there's a lot of things that should be specifically noted in there. So one thing that seems to hang a lot of people up is not being specific in their scope of works. And what I mean when I say that is you might have a scope of work for a living room, okay? And it might say paint walls, change outlets, and paint trim, okay? Well, you come back into the property and you find that the walls have been painted purple, the trim has been painted green, and all of the outlets have been changed from white to beige for whatever reason. Because you didn't specify in the scope of work that the walls are to be painted, whatever color, landlord beige or agreeable gray or whatever the case may be, you're leaving it open to interpretation. Same thing with the trim. I want, marshmallow white trim or whatever. If you didn't specify it, now it's left open to interpretation. Trying to close loops where things can be open to interpretation is huge when you're writing a scope of work. So for instance, on a scope of work that we're doing for, say, an apartment turnover, I would probably write something along the lines of paint walls in landlord gray includes 2 coats. So now I know that we're going in and we're doing 2 coats of paint on those walls, and we're pricing for 2 coats of paint on those walls, as opposed to just paint walls is too vague. It's not really specifying what it is that you're doing. So being specific in your being specific in your scope of work will help you because it removes some of the interpretation. And then you can go and say, okay, well, I understand that you painted the walls purple, but the scope of work here says that you were supposed to paint the walls agreeable gray. Now you're on the hook. You have to go back in as the vendor and repair this. This is not what was agreed upon. So, being specific in your scope of work is huge. And the more specific you can be, there is a point where it gets overboard, don't get me wrong. But if there's something that you want done a specific way, make sure that it's spelled out how it's supposed to be done. Like if you're looking for a certain a certain light fixture, if you're looking for a certain shade of paint, if you're looking for a certain sheen, I want flat, I want semi-gloss, I want full gloss. Just specifying things makes it that much easier for you to trust that the vendor is going to do what you've asked them to do, because you've really spelled it out and made it as simple as possible to take all the question marks out of there. The next thing that I want to make note of on the scope of work is that it is as specific as possible, number one, but that there are also dates and timelines. So you want to know what the commencement date of the work is going to be. Assuming that you're going to be doing a multiple draw payment schedule, so you're going to be paying someone in pieces as the project goes on, you're going to want to set either a timeline or a specific date such that it's very clear when the next draw is due. So let's say you're turning over a 1-bedroom apartment. So you've got a living room, a dining room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom. So what you could say is, okay, once all 5 rooms are painted, the vendor is now eligible to take a draw of X to start the next portion of the work. Or you could set it up by date so that, and I try not to go by date, and the reason I say that is because setting it up by date, if the vendor's, hasn't been there for a week. Now they suddenly expect a paycheck at the end of the week when they haven't actually done anything. I would try to avoid setting a specific date for a draw. I would actually set it to be progress based. So once the rooms are painted to our satisfaction, you're eligible for the next draw. Once the flooring is replaced in the living room and the bedroom, then you're eligible for the next draw. And whatever the case may be, this is something that you can negotiate with the contractor. You know, a lot of guys need some funds up front to get work started so that they can go out and buy materials and stuff like that. All of that should be discussed, negotiated, and written into the scope of work before anybody starts on day one. So that covers your dates and timelines. It also covers your payment schedule. You might work something into the scope of work that says if they're not done by a certain date, that there's a penalty of X number of dollars a day for being late on getting the job done or something like that. That can be kind of a double-edged sword, because if somebody doesn't complete the work when they're supposed to have the work done, and now they know they're getting penalized every single day, you might think, okay, well, that's a you know, kind of a wake-up call. They're going to want to come and finish this job so they get paid. Yeah, but once you reach a certain point where they know that they're going to lose money even if they finish the job, they may just never show up again. So that's something to keep in mind. That being said, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about when it comes to discussing how to protect yourself when working with contractors. Like I said, you can talk about this for hours, but those are the two main things, the three main things that I would say would resolve most people's concerns with vendors. Making sure that they have proper insurance so that if something happens, you're protected. Making sure you have their tax information so that you can properly report it come tax time. And then making sure that you have a written scope of work that's specific in its nature with defined timelines, defined payment schedule, etc., etc. Both parties should sign off on the scope of work, both the vendor and you, so that everyone is in agreement as to what's happening, and then go from there. One thing I did not put on here is licensing and permits. That's really kind of a municipality by municipality thing, at least here in the state of New York, as to the permitting process, the licensing process. It's different in every municipality. I know in some states it's actually handled at the state level. You become licensed at the state level as a contractor, which is really how I think it should be here in New York. They do it with real estate brokers, but they don't do it with contractors, and I've never really understood that. But anyways, you know, making sure that proper licenses are in place is important. Make sure you have a copy or can verify that they have a proper license in place if a license is required. And generally speaking, if someone has a license, they're probably going to have insurance as well, assuming it hasn't lapsed. Because in order to get licensed in most municipalities, you're going to have to show proof of insurance. So that's worth noting as well. If you're doing a job that requires a permit, make sure that you have a copy of that permit before the job starts, and make sure that there's a copy posted on the job site as well, in case any inspectors stop by. If you're not sure if you need somebody who's licensed, if you're not sure if you need a permit to do a job, call your local municipality, ask the building code enforcement people, and they'll be glad to tell you. Pretty straightforward. So that pretty much wraps up everything with regards to talking about contractors. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager drop every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Buffalo Foreclosed Homes. I will plug the Rent Prep page here as well. They're at facebook.com/tenant screening, I believe, if you want to find their Facebook page. You can follow us on Instagram, instagram.com/ownbuffalo. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can find the link for that over on our website, or just by going to YouTube and searching for the company name. And last but not least, you can grab your free 30-minute phone consultation. The link for that is over at ownbuffalo.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love producing Ask a Property Manager, and you can help us to improve by dropping a question in the comments either here on Facebook or over on YouTube. Your question may get picked up and answered during an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content, or if I brought some value to your day, please do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, and we want to help as many people as possible to find us and hear the message that we're trying to put out there. Liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing all help us to grow. The more you can do that for us, the more we appreciate it. Next week's episode will be live on June 24th, 10 a.m. Eastern. It'll be another show you're not going to want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.